What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another GTD episode. My name is Cameron Selby, and we are going to be breaking down the NFL DraftKings wildcard slate for the first weekend of the playoffs. I'm very excited. It's a 6-gamer. Obviously, Seattle and Denver are on a bye this week, but otherwise, we have 6 very interesting, exciting matchups. The most wide open playoffs that I can remember in a very, very long time. Head-to-head wise, I feel not confident at all in my picks, but at the end of the day, DraftKings is a week-to-week thing. We're playing for this weekend and this weekend alone, and it doesn't matter about the winners and losers. It matters about who scores the most fantasy points. And so, yeah, it's exciting to break down. There's Saturday only contest. There's Sunday only contest. There's going to be a showdown for every single game. We're only going to be breaking down the 6-gamer, which goes through from Saturday through the Monday night game, which concludes with Houston and Pittsburgh. So I'm excited to break it all down. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know your playoff, your Super Bowl winner prediction at the very moment. Claim your horse right now. If I had to put it down, I think I'm still riding with my Super Bowl matchup, even though I'm way, way less confident because both teams have to go on the road. If you remember from our 2025 season predictions video, I ended up saying it was going to be the Rams versus the Bills. I picked the Bills over the Rams in that Super Bowl bracket, but then this time I think I'm going to switch my pick to the Rams side of things. I still think they get there. Way, way less confident, like I said, but it is a completely wide open playoffs, and I'm excited to see it all transpire. But without further ado, I'd say let's get rocking and rolling. It's an exciting slate. Let's break it down. And kicking it off, we're going to start off with the quarterback position like always. And what makes me very excited about it is that everybody is affordable and the ownership is still very, very, very spread out. But there's one main guy I want to talk about, want to discuss, and he is going to be the most popular quarterback this weekend, but I don't think the ownership is even close to what it should be, and that is Mr. Josh Allen. He is the one superstar quarterback available on the AFC side of the bracket with Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes of the world all missing, and so it's old man Aaron Rodgers and a bunch of young bucks going at it in the AFC side of things, and Josh Allen is the one that has not only the most upside, but by far the highest floor. We've seen it up and down this season. Only finished with 25 passing touchdowns, and he had shown a pretty solid floor most part of the season. He did have a couple more lulls than we are accustomed to seeing since he really took that leap. Only had 25 touchdowns this year, 3,600 passing yards, but at the same time, very, very consistent. 3 of the last 4 games he finished the year at least 24 fantasy points. Unless there's somebody scoring multiple rushing touchdowns, which on the other side of this game very well could be, because Trevor Lawrence is finished as the QB1 in the fantasy postseason stretch of games. I just prefer riding with the quarterback in the best weather game, the guy that is leading the team that is favored in by far the highest total. They are a 52-point total between Jacksonville and Buffalo this week. The next highest is 46. So a lot of points are expected to be scored. I expect a possible shootout. And if that's going to happen, Josh Allen is going to get close to his ceiling performances, which in the postseason, for the most part, he has been absolutely lights out in the last 5 years as a sample. His first ever postseason game was 27 fantasy points, and that was the weird one where he's lateraling on the 2-minute drive and just boneheaded decisions. But he's got 35-point games in there, 27, 42, 28, 41, 33, 31, 25. Only finished with 21 fantasy points. But against Jacksonville, who is gettable as a defense, I know they are playing some of the best football over the last 8 weeks over any team. But if the Buffalo Bills, who are favored, have any chance of winning this game, all of the numbers say to side with Jacksonville as a home underdog. But whether or not you pick Buffalo to win this game, if they're in this game whatsoever, it's going to be because Josh Allen is being Superman. And if he's going to be Superman, I want him in as many lineups as possible. I think he's that much of a difference maker. And on DraftKings, even though he is the highest priced quarterback, even though he is the highest owned quarterback, only $7,000, less than 20% owned. Give me all the Josh Allen this weekend. I'm really, really excited for the matchup for him. Now, on the other side of things, I just mentioned Trevor Lawrence having one of the best stretches of his young career. It took a while to get there, but I mean, look at the last stretch of games where he just, in the last 7 games, at least 19 fantasy points in 7 straight. 21, he's had at least 21 fantasy points in 6 of those 7, has had 4 rushing touchdowns baked in there. He's throwing for touchdowns again. He has a 5 passing touchdown game against the Jets, a 3 touchdown against Denver on the road against the 1 seed, and then follow that up with a season finale where they took care of business against Tennessee, ends up with 23 fantasy points and 3 passing touchdowns. He's just playing lights out right now. In Buffalo, They are much, much better against the pass than they are against the run. But at the same time, like I mentioned, it's a big total game, and if it is a true shootout, both of these quarterbacks have the path to go off. And on top of that, you save $900. You probably feel a little better about the stacking options because it's always tough to trust Josh Allen. Who is he throwing the deep ball to? There's no 11 target floor. There's no 8 to 10 target floor for any of his receivers. So with Jacksonville, since Jacoby Myers came over, he's been a very consistent guy. He's unlocked some, decent floor performances, but it's still too inconsistent for me. But Travis Etienne is really taking over in the backfield as a PPR friendly back. Brendan Strange is a pretty reliable tight end that won't be that expensive. So you feel better about stacking Trevor Lawrence than Josh Allen, but at the same time, both of them are in play, and I'm interested in seeing what happens. Both of them right now are showing the two highest owned quarterbacks, and for good reason. It's the highest total game. Like I said, it's the best weather game. So I expect a lot of people to be gravitating towards these two quarterbacks in that Sunday game at noon. About 30. It looks like at least 30% of the ownership will be going to these two guys. Again, you can make the argument because of the cold weather games going on this week and tougher matchups that it's under-owned based on these two guys. Right now, I think building with that game heavily considered. I don't think there's any reason you should fade this game whatsoever. And it just makes you feel even weirder if you're not playing either quarterback, but then you're playing multiple guys in this game, especially if you're going to side with the Buffalo side of things. Next up, though, Matthew Stafford, Drake May, both vying for, I guess they're 1 and 2 in terms of the potential MVPs of this league this season. Matthew Stafford throughout the season, though, put up much better numbers. 46 touchdowns, 8 picks. The problem is they didn't take care of their business at the very end of the season. They lost a game to Carolina, who they're playing this weekend. Dropped a game they shouldn't have lost. Seattle, they were up by 10, and then all of a sudden they weren't, and then losing overtime in one of the best games, probably my favorite game of the entire season. And then against Atlanta, controlling your own destiny on an isolated game and throwing Matthew Stafford having 3 turnovers, Atlanta upsetting them, took them out of the conversation for the 1 seed. So what is my Super Bowl pick? What made you feel very comfortable as a, holding the 1 seed edge throughout most of the season? Now you have to go on the road more than likely every single game to get to the Super Bowl. And if that's the case, it's going to be a tough path. That said, they are the biggest favorite by far this week, 10.5 point favorites on the road. A little bit scarier, just especially Carolina took care of business last time. I don't expect them to upset the Rams once again, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that the Rams can't struggle. Last time he did play them, they did drop 28 points, but he was only involved on 2 touchdowns, 14 fantasy points, and again, it's pretty obvious, but he is not one to use his legs. So the thing is, he's got to get there by throwing for 300 plus. Carolina's secondary is pretty decent. It's a bottom 10 matchup for them. But at the same time, Devontae Adams is supposed to return this week. And even if he is limited, him as a red zone threat is a big, big opening of things. And on top of that, because he did have a stretch of games where he wasn't catching touchdowns, coupled with the hamstring injury that knocked him out for the rest of the regular season, he's at a reasonable price point to where if you are forcing a Matthew Stafford double, obviously it makes you feel much more comfortable if you're going Devontae plus Puka. In the middle stages of the season, when both of them were 7,500 and 8,500 plus Matthew Stafford being the highest price quarterback, it was really, really tough to get to. But now it feels a little bit more affordable because there's about a $2,000 price gap between the two receivers. And if you're going to force that decision, I don't mind it. Plus, I think it's a little bit of decent leverage on the field because of the fact that it is the first game of the weekend. And a lot of people don't want to put all their chips into the first egg or basket. They do have one of the highest implied totals on the entire weekend. And he is showing as a pretty decent leverage play. Only 5% projected ownership, which is, I think, really, really strong for a guy capable of throwing for 4 touchdowns and 300 yards. So that's not the worst way to go about approaching this slate is attacking a high scoring offense in a possible bounce back spot And hopefully it is somewhat a little trappy so that it isn't a blowout. They don't ruin their floor and they have to get to their ceiling in just 3 to 2.5 quarters. Drake May is going to be an interesting one. Showing good leverage right now, but to me, it is a tough matchup. Cold on a Sunday night. It's cold on a Sunday night. It's his playoff debut. He's had a hell of a season, but it's just a little hard to trust. I think this is somewhat of a trappy game against the Los Angeles Chargers, who will be resting their starters for a week this past week in week 18. And while he has done pretty strong, he's thrown 5 passing touchdowns against the Jets. Well, guess what? The Jets have been really bad. They were the first team in NFL history to not have an interception in the modern era of football. Not a single interception this year, and you're throwing for 5 touchdowns on them. That's cool, but it's not nearly as impressive as going against the Chargers, who are number 2 against quarterbacks. We're a top 10 scoring defense. We're a top 5 against the pass this year. And yes, you have upside as a rushing quarterback, but I don't think that there's a ceiling game in play. And so him being the 3rd highest owned quarterback, if I just have to spend $200 to get to Josh Allen, $100 to get to Matthew Stafford, and on top of that, you feel much better stacking Matthew Stafford with his options. Drake May, other than Stephon Diggs, and sometimes Hunter Henry, it's really hard from a week to week basis knowing who to go with on his side of things. So I think he is a cross out for me. That said, he is low owned. I mean, all of these guys are less than 20% owned as of right now, unless you're playing cash games. So I would rather go up or go way down instead of going there. So that is one of my stands I'm taking this weekend. Jalen Hurts, I don't know where the rushing upside went, but it has been gone over the last 5 weeks. He has had one game in the last 5 where he has scored at least 20 fantasy points, has not unlocked a big game whatsoever. The one time that he did score over 20, only had 15 passing attempts, which is by far the fewest of that stretch. 3 passing touchdowns. That was the way he got to his ceiling performance, and it was against the Raiders, who have the number 1 pick, so it's not that as impressive. But other than that, you're like the rushing upside is just gone. He's had 2 games this year. Both of them happened against Dallas, where he had 2 rushing touchdowns. Other than that, it's the occasional tush push, but it doesn't feel like he's running as much. They're not nearly as successful at it. And on top of that, he's had multiple halves this year where he hasn't even completed a pass. That said, though, it's a decent price point because of his bad stretch. This is his cheapest price point of the entire season. And this is a sneaky, fun shootout game if Philly can hold their weight of that. I think he's just kind of in the middle for me. It's hard to feel confident in it because they haven't really shown much consistency, and this season really feels eerily similar to how they finished the 2024 season, where they started out 10-0 and then just shit the bed, got blown out by Tampa Bay. It has similar vibes, and I wonder if that's the case this week. I'm actually picking San Fran to win outright, even though they're on the road. So it's a tough situation, but I think the path is there. I mean, San Francisco recently, but I think the path is there. San Francisco recently, they've had a lot of bad quarterback play that they've played against. Other than this past week where Seattle kind of grinded out a low-scoring win at home to avenge their week 1 loss, they've played Phillip Rivers, they've played Cam Ward, they've played Shadur, they've played Bryce Young. That's Jacoby Brissett. That's not a quality stretch of quarterback play that they've had to play against, and yet they're still giving up some points recently. They gave up 27 to Phillip Rivers. Caleb Williams, who's had a decent stretch, obviously he dropped 38 on them in week 17, had 330 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, almost had a third at the very end of the game, where San Fran held on to win. And then other than that, you have to go back to a sample size of when they were playing against the Rams, where the last time they did play them, Matthew Stafford had 4 passing touchdowns, 280 passing yards. But really, yes, technically from a record perspective, the schedule wasn't as easy as a strength of schedule perceives. But from a quarterback play perspective, they've had only a handful of quarterbacks that they've actually played, and it's actually been a relevant offense or a capable offense. And for the most part, when they've played those guys, they've struggled. As long as the weather holds up, I don't see it as a I see it as a 40-degree, 10 to 15 mile an hour wind, kind of typical standard. Actually, probably better than you would expect at this time of the year in Philly. And I don't mind Jalen Hurts. Brock Purdy also playing lights out recently. Had a really tough game against Seattle, who are one of the best defenses in football. With 3 straight games, at least 27 fantasy points. He dropped a 40 bomb against the Chicago Bears with 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns, 5 touchdowns the week before that. With George Kittle having another week to get off his bum ankle, CMC is one of the safest picks. I mean, I have a lot of interest in this game. I just wonder whether or not I am going to land on a stack with either of these guys, because it really kind of, because of the pricing of both San Francisco players and Philly players, it's hard to just play 3 or 4 pieces in this game and then also have enough money to go with Buffalo or Jacksonville guys as well. Which Jacksonville, I know they're a reasonable price point, but even though price everybody's affordable, it's not like there's a ton of value anywhere that you can just play multiple 3K guys, feel great about it, and then go like, this is the playoffs now. Everybody's playing that can play, and so it just kind of muddies up the water a little bit in that regard. So more balanced builds are usually the way to go. But the problem is going with these guys in this game just means that you're playing less in the much more enticing game. Jumping down to the 5K range, a lot of good names, decent spots, and you just kind of got to figure out what you want to do with Justin Herbert. Remember, it feels like every single year he's just dealing with some kind of ailment. Missing both tackles and finding ways to get to the postseason is awesome. But at the same time, from a fantasy perspective, he has not, since week 10, been very good as a fantasy reliable quarterback. Only one time since week 9 did he have at least 17 fantasy points. Every single game other than that was a dud. Not having the 300-yard bonus upside unlocked that often, not having multiple touchdown upside, it really kind of hurts him and his upside. On top of that, it's really tough to just have confidence, but it's also really tough to have confidence in investing in any of these pass catchers with them as well, because Ladd's been up and down. Quentin Johnston's had some goose eggs. Keenan Allen has been a floor of like 6, but a ceiling recently of like 12. So it's not like you're seeing a ton. And again, Dallas, everybody threw on them. It's not as impressive going into the postseason. Tennessee was the other one. Minnesota was the other one. Indy was the other one. It's a common theme. They're not playoff teams. So he has not had a strong fantasy day since. He's not truly had a strong fantasy day against a really, really strong team since at the very, very beginning of the season, when he had tackles and he had health and all that stuff. So I think it's a tough thing to get behind. I actually think the Chargers have a shot in this game, even though it is a 2-7 matchup. But if they win, it's going to be more so a low-scoring, grinded-out game, not a shootout. I don't think that is in the cards for them. Caleb Williams, Jordan Love. This one looks like it's going to possibly be the worst weather game of the weekend. Caleb Williams, round 3 against Green Bay. Last time we saw them, it was one of the best finishes of the year with his beautiful dot to DJ Moore to walk-off win in overtime against them and salvaging his day after a really tough stretch. And he's kind of been the leader of these cardiac kids where they're just having really tough first halves, and then they find a way to pour it on in the second half. And so that can salvage you to a really solid day. But at the same time, it makes you feel a little uncomfortable going forward. Rome Odunze should be back. He was taken off the injury report on Thursday, which is a very, very good sign. But at the same time, since all of the receivers are in the 5K range, Colson Loveland's had a strong game, so he's kind of been boosted up a little bit. It's uncomfortable to invest in that. On top of that, if you're going to say there's some possible snow showers or flurries, it's not like there's a ton of crazy bad wind, but at the same time, it could pick up. It's supposed to get really cold around the country throughout the weekend. So this being a Saturday night game, I think it's just something to monitor. If he does have the multiple touchdowns, he could get there. But even in games that he did have that, he's had 2 touchdowns in each of the games against Green Bay, only unlocking 21 fantasy points, but it took overtime, 15.9 with the 2 passing touchdowns against them in the previous matchup. Decent price point. I just don't know if that's the game I want to stack. Jordan Love on the other side, he's also missed multiple recent weeks with a concussion. And yeah, he should be healthy going into the game, but he could be very rusty. And also, Green Bay is another set of receivers. There's a lot of receiver groups in this week that just it's uncomfortable to look at and invest in. That's another game that I'm probably going to avoid stacking. The lowest total game of the weekend is going to be some of the bottom quarterbacks, CJ Stroud, Aaron Rodgers. I see this as a 13-10 game, one way or the other. I don't see any kind of excitement to go to either side because it's in Pittsburgh. Even though it's a decent matchup, I don't trust CJ Stroud because he has no rushing upside. He has not unlocked ceiling performances recently. The only time that he has had 20 fantasy points in recent games is when he went for 300 plus against San Francisco, and then when he went for 3 passing touchdowns against Arizona. Other than that, it's a lot of less than 15 fantasy point games, so I'm not really interested there. Houston's defense is awesome. And on top of that, Aaron Rodgers also doesn't have great ceiling performances recently, though he is as a real life quarterback playing much better going into the postseason, which is a good sign for Pittsburgh. But yeah, I just see this as the lowest scoring game, the sicko game. And yeah, I'll play the showdown, but I'm probably going to limit my exposure to stacking multiple pieces in that game. I don't think that interests me whatsoever. Going over to the running backs, though, very fun names in a lot of different ranges. So CMC starting it off. I want a lot of CMC if I find my way to get there. I think he separates himself from the rest of the group. I don't think anybody else has the 30-point upside like he does this week. There's a lot of guys that have solid floors that have gotten here throughout the year, but I don't think there's really anybody that's going to unlock a multi-touchdown, 100-yard bonus kind of performance confidently. And yeah, sure, anybody can do it, but it's like I think it's an even money bet on whether or not any running back this weekend hits 100 yards rushing. So it's not like even Vegas thinks that any of these guys are really in for a big shootout kind of ceiling performance. If that's the case, he's got a floor of, I guess he lowered his floor to 11, and it's hard to typically access your fantasy floor when you're only scoring 3 real life points. But I don't expect that to be the case this week. I mentioned earlier, I'm very interested in this game as picking some pieces. And if that's the case, I'm just shooting for that big upside play. I really like CMC this week, and he's 1,000 different. He's going to be one of the higher owned running backs, but at the same time, all these running backs showing under 50% owned. So it's really spread out. And because of the fact, like I said, there's not just instant value somewhere, it's really hard to get up to these multiple spend ups up top. So that's why a lot of the ownership is pretty spread out, and that's why I like it so much. I'm interested in CMC, even if he is going to be 40% owned. Going down, though, James Cook has been pretty strong throughout the year, pretty safe, has had that 100-yard bonus upside. He's hit that 6 times this year. He's actually hit that 9 times this year. And yes, he played last week, and he only got that to get incentives, lead the league in rushing. But if you're counting the games that he truly played, he played 16 games. 9 of them he had 100+ rushing yards. So that's as safe as a floor as you can get as a running back. That said, though, it is actually the toughest matchup of the entire weekend in terms of running backs. They were number 2 against running backs this entire season. And like I said, there's a lot of points to be had. So he could default into a inefficient 2-touchdown day. But at the same time, it's really tough to get there, especially 7,400 kind of really handicaps you, especially when you have 2 guys below him that have better matchups and just as good environments. Saquon has been frustrating to roster recently. There's good matchups where it's against Buffalo, and Buffalo was bottom 10 against running backs and bottom 2 in DVOA to the run game. And yet he's going in a bad weather game inefficiently, no targets, 68 yards rushing because Philly can't move the ball. But then he's also in decent matchups, scoring 100, rushing for 100 yards, scoring a touchdown. Him being 7,000, the interesting point, but at the same time, it's him versus AJ Brown to me in terms of interest with this Philly game because they're basically the same price point. And I think I slightly side and prefer with AJ Brown than I do with Saquon. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of the approach I'm taking at the very moment. Travis Etienne also finished the year strong. Remember, he's going to be free agent going into the offseason. and he's really trying to unlock some payday. And this is a good way to do it, is them going on a long run out of nowhere. Going against Buffalo is a, on paper, good matchup. I think because everybody sees that green 25, that means he's just going to be one of the higher roster running backs. If I had a preferable stacking option and price didn't matter, I would say that he would be my favorite bring back of a Buffalo stack. But at the same time, it's tough to get to 6,600. I think Kyron Williams also in a decent spot. Last time we played Carolina was very efficient with 5.5 yards a carry, but they were playing from behind the whole game, and he just had no PPR friendliness in that game. Going forward, if they're 10.5-point favorites, I think that there's a real good chance that he could have a really solid day. But does his floor performance of 14 help or hurt you? Because there are other guys that could drop 25 in front of him. But at the same time, it's not like any of them have the better matchup than him. So it just kind of comes down to him, Blake Corum, the split, because Blake Corum has actually taken away a decent amount of opportunities. I know the snap split is usually about 2-1, but at the same time, like Blake Corum, you come down here at 5,400. I'm not paying $5,400 for Blake Corum, but against the Cardinals, obviously that was a game that they played pretty much most of their starters throughout the game. 14 opportunities there. Against Atlanta, they were falling behind, so they didn't really do much, but double-digit touches for the last 5 games. That's the thing that makes me nervous about Kyron. It isn't necessarily the matchup, whether or not the Rams are going to put up points. It's more so just, hey, this could be a Seattle situation, but with tougher ownership. Because usually nobody wants to play Zach Charbonnet, nobody wants to play Kenneth Walker. And if you're saying that Kyron's going to be a top 5 owned running back this week, that's just some that I've got to kind of wrestle with. If I'm going to play multiple lines, he's going to be in my player pool. But if I had to narrow down one single line to play for all the marbles, I don't know if he's going to make the cut. That's the only tough thing about it. Josh Jacobs is showing as a top 3 owned running back, and he has been banged up. Something's wrong with his knee. Since week 15, or outside of week 15 where he had 2 touchdowns, he hasn't unlocked a 100-yard game. He hasn't had a ton of PPR upside. And recently in games, he didn't, obviously they rested their starters week 18. But in that game against Chicago in overtime, Emmanuel Wilson was out snapping him, out playing him also. And then the following week, he has 4 carries for 3 yards. I don't understand, even if it is the worst weather game of the weekend, people flocking to this as a top 3 on play. I get it. He's 6,300. I think it's pretty trappy. That is the way that's the way I'm approaching this. And I don't really see the 100-yard bonus. If he falls into 2 touchdowns, all these guys can fall into 2 touchdowns. I'm not going to bank on a multi-touchdown game just to get there. I don't think the floor is that high. And if he's showing us nearly 40% owned after the stretch that he's had, the injury he's dealing with, I understand if he's good to go in practice, but I don't see it. I don't trust it, and I'm going to stay away. Now, Omari Hampton is the one that I want to keep an eye on because I think this is a sneaky fun matchup because I don't think a lot of people are playing Chargers this week. It looks like the highest owned Charger, that's Oronde Gadsden, which he's more so by default ownership because he's $3,400 and everybody's trying to find cheap options. Outside of him, the highest owned Charger is Keenan Allen at 12%, and then after that, it's 10% or less for every single other player. So if you want to look at New England, I know it says 7th, right? As a casual, a lot of people that if you're playing big tournaments and stuff like that, they're just picking better matchups, best lines and stuff like that. Well, no one's really talking about how New England has just given up a shit ton to the run game in recent weeks. Obviously, the Miami was a weird sample because they didn't have Devon Achane, and I honestly don't really care about how Jalen Wright did, how Ollie Gordon did. On top of that, it's the Miami Dolphins. But in a 42-10 blowout, over 100 yards allowed to Breece Hall. The week before that, over 120 yards and 2 touchdowns allowed to Derrick Henry. Before that, you had a 100-yard, 2-touchdown performance to James Cook. Before that, you had Devin Singletary scoring a touchdown, efficiently 5 yards to carry. You had Chase Brown rushing for 100 yards. So even though they've been playing a lot of non-playoff teams, they've given up a lot recently to running backs. Problem is, Omari Hampton Obviously, he was out with a fracture. I think it was a partial fracture of his ankle. Was out 6 weeks. He came back and he's been really ramping up and being involved. Most recently had 8 opportunities in terms of targets. But he's been a DNP 2 days in a row now. And so last week, the Chargers were the first to announce they were resting their starters. And then Omarion Hampton was a part of that. So we didn't think anything of it. But him being a second day, being a non-participant is starting to be concerning. And I think Friday, as this video comes out, this is going to be the biggest talking point. And I hope we get information one way or the other before lock. But if we don't, that just is going to lower ownership. If he does not play, Kamani Vidal at 4,700, Kamani Vidal at 4,700, look at the efficiency he had look at the strong performances he had without Omarion Hampton in the fold. He had a 25-point day, a 22-point day, an 18-point day, sandwiched by some duds. There's no denying that. But going against a team that has given up a lot to running backs, I think the Chargers have a decent shot to win this game. Call me crazy if you must, but either way, if Omarion Hampton's out, there is no other player that you're rostering in this price range. I don't think there's any reason to go down this low. And if you're going to, at $4,700, I have a lot of interest. And I think by far he'd be the highest value on the slate if he went down that low. I think a lot of people are going to be trying to go with multiple low 6K running backs or going one high, one medium. But going this low, and on top of that, this is the second to last game of the entire weekend. So if we don't get that information, if you have this late swap ability, which less people do, the premise of late swap being, hey, after lock, I'm trying to get good leverage on the field, leave some openings to twist and change my lineup, if then statements, if you will. Like, I already have an idea of something to do with one of my first looks if you were to go with investing with the Charger running back. If Omarion Hampton plays, nobody is playing him right now. So if you play multiple lines, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 5, you're doubling, tripling, quadrupling the field on his ownership. And I want to get overweight to the Charger running back situation as a whole, which is what interests me so much. Now, other than that, this is the tough range where it becomes a lot of running back 1A, 1Bs, who's getting the touches, who's getting the scores. I don't think I have an interest in the Carolina guys, so I'm going to just take stands and cross guys out. So backup running back for Green Bay, if Josh Jacobs is playing, that doesn't mean that he can't have an efficient day, but I'm not playing him on a DK lineup at 53. Kyle Monangai has some interest because he's had a decent amount of touches. It is a bad weather game. So Chicago might be the most intriguing, if I had to say. I'm not even touching with the 10-foot pole Brian Robinson Jr. at 5,000. Blake Corum, you can talk me into if it's a blowout, decent matchup. He's getting more opportunities, but he is $5,400, which I believe is the highest price he's been outside of last week, which we knew Rams could possibly rest starters. So that's why he jumped up that far. But other than that, he's been in the 4K range the entire season. So with that said, that's a tough price point to get. Decent tournament play, though. DeAndre Swift for just 500 more than Kyle guy. Don't mind that. Ramondre Stevenson has gone freaking bananas each of the last 2 games with 5 touchdowns, unlocked some down the field receiving touchdowns, but he's had 3 straight games, at least 17 fantasy points. If New England's scoring points, he has a decent opportunity to do so. It's a tough matchup, though. And then Travion Henderson on the other side of things, yeah, he's been getting more snaps and opportunities, but since Ramondre's come back and been healthy, he's had to break touchdowns, like in this Buffalo game where I think he broke multiple 50-yard touchdowns for the second time this season. Other than breaking touchdowns, like, you're having the efficient or decent days averaging 4 yards a carry, but one, there's no reason you should be having 0 target games being that caliber of a running back. But if that is in the cards, I don't really have an interest paying $6K for a running back that is not PPR friendly and also has decent competition as a goal line running back. So I'm probably exiting out New England running backs in the pool because they're similar price points and all that stuff. Pittsburgh running backs, it's not a good matchup. It's a sicko game. DK Metcalf is back. I think Kenneth Gainwell is priced at his absolute ceiling. For the last 5 games, at least 7 targets, which is very fun. But at the same time, can you play a $5,900 Kenneth Gainwell? I don't know if you can on a team that could just only score 10 points. I don't know if that's in the cards for me. Jalen Warren does have a Q tag. I don't think there's really much concern. He DNP'd the first couple of days is due to an illness. Since it's a Monday game, it's the last game of the week. I don't have any kind of worry about him playing. If you do have the opportunity to play him, like, more power to you. They're both low owned, but that's just pretty much the approach I'm taking. Is I'm looking on that Chargers situation. I want to get overweight to that. Chicago interests me a little bit because of the price points, and other than that, it's the big four up top. I'm going to pick at least one of these guys, probably in every single line, and then move from there. Pass catchers, I'm going to fly through so we can build some lines. It's Puka, the rest of the field. Can you spend 8,700 for him? Last time he did play Carolina, that was his worst fantasy game. What was it, since week 6? Which he left that Baltimore game early. So other than that, the games he's played in full, that was his worst scoring game of the season. He's $8,700. Usually his floor is as strong as can be, but does he unlock the ceiling in a potential blowout? It's not the craziest best matchup. He is kind of matchup proof though. But $8,700, $1,500 more than the next best guy. And I just think a lot of people are going to put him in because of those ceilings. But it's going to be hard to fit him in and then comfortable stacks. And like I said, if I had to decide between CMC or Puka Nacua, I think I side with CMC more than I do with Puka Nacua, because I think there's a bunch of cheaper receivers that have value in the 4 or 5K range. Nico Collins and AJ Brown are the next most expensive guys, but because of the running back pricing, nobody's playing either of them. Right now, both Nico Collins and AJ Brown in good matchups are less than 10% owned. And they're the second and third highest priced receivers. They're the second and third essentially highest projected receivers. And I just don't get the ownership. And if a lot of people are going to be flocking, they're going to be zigging in this area for the running backs, I'm going to zag and I'm going to be overweight to both of these guys because they're both good matchups. I could see pass. If I'm playing anybody for Houston, the price doesn't matter. I want to play Nico Collins. We just saw what Zay Flowers was able to do and get behind in a low volume passing offense. If Houston has a path to score points, I don't think it's going to be a just really pounded into the ground day. The problem is Nico doesn't have as confident of a floor in terms of targets, but he is on the field all the time, and it just comes down to, can he score a touchdown? Can he get over 100 yards? And I think there's a possibility he can. So I want to be overweight to both of them if they're that low owned. And then after that, it really kind of drops down in price. Devontae Adams, I mentioned returning. I think it's just whether or not you think he scores touchdowns. I don't see him with 100-yard immediately coming back from a hammy and coming for a 10-target multi-touchdown 100-yard bonus day. I think it's more so it's going to be 5 targets, but he could catch 2 touchdowns. That is very much in the cards, like he just did against Carolina way back in week 13. And 21 points is going to get you there, 65. I think it's a wait-and-see approach for ownership. I think his ownership is showing really good leverage right now, but I think that might be a falsity with how low it is. Because of the highest implied total, he's only 6,500. I think more people will flock to him than we're leading to believe on right now. After that, Stephon Diggs, I think, could be a good spot. New England is kind of thinning out a little bit at receiver. If I wanted to filter to the game a little bit, Kayshon Boutte, still questionable. He was limited, but it's a hammy. He's also been inconsistent. Matt Collins still on IR. So he's going to be on the field a ton, and I think he's a pretty safe option going that route. I think if I had to pick this guy versus that guy, I slightly side with Stephon over Devontae, but you can make the argument either way. Tataroa, it's a decent matchup because a lot of people have thrown successfully on the Rams in recent weeks, but it's a rookie receiver with a quarterback of Bryce Young, probably the worst of the bunch in this postseason. It's hard to trust bad quarterback play in the postseason. Last time he did play the Rams, he caught a touchdown. That was his only catch of the game. So him being 6,000, I think that's a little too rich for me. But at the same time, the guys right below him, it's not like I have a ton of confidence in them either. It's more so I think I want to take the approach of just being overweight to guys in the 6 and 7K range, and then be underweight to all these 5K guys, because Roma Dunze being back, cool. I had an interest. I didn't expect you to be $5,800 freaking dollars, because he hasn't played since week 13. He had a foot injury. He came and then in warm-ups of that game aggravated it and was out. And since then you've had Luther Burden, who at a value right now at $4,600 has made the most of his opportunity. But if Roma's in there, then that's just going to be less opportunities all around. And I think it could just be a by committee approach where everybody gets 6 targets, everybody's like 50 or less yards. And I don't even know, because it's the worst weather game, if that's even the route you should go. DK could be back, or DK is back following his suspension. He's a decent price point, but it's a bad matchup. I think going with the Jacksonville receiver is fine, but Parker Washington has had multiple 100-yard games recently, 3 straight games to end the year with at least 19 fantasy points. That was supposed to be Brian Thomas. Where's Brian Thomas? You mean the guy who was a borderline first-round pick receiver? You mean the guy that was a borderline first-round draft pick in terms of fantasy drafts this year? Yeah, he's been an absolute no-show for the most part this year. In Trevor Lawrence's best stretch, arguably, of his career, Brendan Strange is going off. You have Jacoby Myers having good floor games. Brian Thomas is just not – it's just not it. It's not working. I don't know what happened. It's the craziest thing. You would think that having Jacoby Myers and Parker Washington stepping up would just open things up for him. But it just has not. He's $4,700. Getting pieces of this game, I think is a fine way to go, but I think I just feel more comfortable going with the Jacoby Myers. Probably not a Parker, but at the same time, if you want to go that route, I understand. New England has been thrown on a little bit also, but it's just hard to trust Charger guys. That said, they're all low owned. So if their last guy's in, I think it's fine. On top of that, it's later in the week, so it's good to have guys in the final couple games in 6 gamers. On top of that, Keenan Allen, $4,200. Like, that's why he's the highest owned Charger right now. It's just because by default we're vying for names down here. In the 4K range, I'm very interested in Shakir because of the fact that he's 4,800. He's been in the low to mid 5Ks the entire season, and it's hard to unlock a ceiling performance. He's had 1 game or 2 games this year, the entire year, where he went over 20 fantasy points. Both of those times were where he had high volume opportunities. I think because he's below 5K, that's by default my favorite stacking option for Josh Allen. That doesn't mean that you need to stack Josh Allen, but $4,800 is fine. Green Bay receivers is one of the better matchups, but it is the worst weather game. It's with a quarterback that is returning from injury. So if you can pick the right guy, cool. Christian Watson always has downfield upside. He's been a decent receiver since he's returned from injury. It's been awesome because I didn't even know if he would play this season since he tore his ACL the final week of last year. But he's been a welcoming sight. He's the highest price of the bunch. And then going down, have no interest in Carolina guys. Houston receivers down low, they're going to be lower owned. So, okay, if you can find the Jalen Noel touchdown, the Jaden Higgins decent day, but all of them are almost touchdown dependent. Most of them don't really have the floor down low. If you're looking at value at receiver, the highest valued guys down low below 5K are Christian Watson, Khalil Shakir, Luther Burden, Romeo Doubs. And even if you want to go all the way down to the 3K range, because we got to find some guys. There's not a single receiver in the 3K range projected over 7 fantasy points. And usually when that is the case, I usually like going double tight end. Tight end, there's guys all over in every kind of range. Dallas Goedert usually sticks out the most because he's had better touchdown equity than Saquon Barkley most of the year. With 11 touchdowns, he's only $4,200. Colston Loveland has unlocked back-to-back games with at least 10 targets. Career best game this past week against Detroit in a losing effort. But even though Cole Kmet's still on the field, he is still unlocking really solid days. And if it is a bad weather game, that could possibly keep his floor pretty decent. Hunter Henry has been very inconsistent, but he's been inconsistent in terms of does he get yards or does he become touchdown dependent. But either way, it's usually flocking to at least 9 fantasy points for the last 5 games to the end of the year. He had at least 10 fantasy points, but had 6, 7 targets, couple 3-target games. Being the second highest priced tight end, and it's a bottom 5 matchup, he's just kind of, all these tight ends can have a path of solid days. Last year, I remember the last couple of years actually for tight ends in wildcard rounds have been very, very valuable. So decent days. Obviously, George Kittle, if he's healthy, has by far the best path of having a ceiling performance. You saw that in the 100-yard game he had in week 16. Missed week 17 due to an ankle injury. Came back and he was the only. I don't even think there was a bright spot, but at least he was targeted 7 times. That was the welcoming side of, no, they truly played him once he returned. It wasn't like he just is a decoy by any stretch, which him being $6,200 is really tough, but I could see him getting there. And if he's only about 11% owned, that more power to you if you can find a way to afford him. And then down low, Dalton Schultz has had some solid floor days for the last 6 games, double-digit fantasy points. He just doesn't have a ton of touchdown equity. Other than that, you have Dalton Kincaid. That might be my favorite, and it's just because I like Josh Allen. It's not necessarily because he's been playing great. The Rams, you had Tyler Higbee return, and he instantly caught 90 yards and a touchdown. I think it was last year, the year before, where he just came in off an injury, and then just every single game he was just peppered with targets. I think one of the games, like, everybody didn't know how his snaps were going to go, and he had like 4 targets on the first drive of the game, and it's just like, oh no, he's here. Problem is, Kobe Parkinson has been playing well. Terrence Ferguson has been playing some snaps. He is questionable though, so any of these guys being out opens him up, and I think him being $3,200, that really is a very interesting point. In terms of snaps last week, like I mentioned, they actually played their starters for the most part. Tyler Higbee played 64% of the snaps. That was his first game since week 11 where he got hurt, and he played 64% of the snaps. That was number 3 on the team, but yet he was still very, very involved as a pass catcher. So being $3,200 is a good price point. Dawson Knox, I get it. Recently has had some 10-point fantasy days. I just don't have an interest. The 93 yards was a mirage, and then other than that, it's been touchdown dependent. So I don't think there's any floor there. Rondé Gadsden, I mentioned being the highest owned Charger by default. He's $3,400. That's the cheapest he's been since he broke out with a big fantasy day against the Indianapolis Colts way back when. But since then, multiple days with less than 10 yards, not getting a ton of targets. It's by committee in terms of who's the pass catcher that goes off. So you don't feel great about it. Pat Freiermuth, with Darnell Washington being ruled out for the year, has played a lot more snaps lately. I was hoping for a bigger ceiling performance this past week. Only had 5 targets, but he got over 50 yards in back-to-back games. And the welcoming thing is just back-to-back games, at least 70% of the snaps. And that is, he's out snapping at this point Jonnu Smith. So if you want a piece in that final game, he might be a guy to go to. Going double tight end makes a lot of sense. But with that said, let's start off building up some lines. I think down low, picking a Packers or a Bears in bad weather makes some sense in terms of value. Pittsburgh and Houston is going to be the lowest scoring game to me. If you can get up to Houston, cool. If you're picking Pittsburgh to win, which I think I might be leaning, then going that route is fine. I think the Chargers have a shot. They've been a pretty decent defense throughout the year, and they're only $2,200. I don't expect New England to throw up 30 points in real life this week, so that just opens up a ton. I don't have an interest in Carolina. San Fran's been too porous. Jacksonville's the highest total game. Buffalo's the highest total game. You can make a somewhat argument for Philly if you're picking them to win. They've had some decent days, sacking the quarterback a lot also. I think I'm probably going to side mostly, though, with Pittsburgh against the shaky Houston offensive line, or the Chargers to save all the way down. But again, if you want to go a different route, more power to you. But my first build is going to start off like that. My 2 thumbnails of the video, Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey. And then I'm going to double stack Josh Allen this time, going with Dalton Kincaid. and with Christian McCaffrey. After that, this was the idea I had, was getting overweight to these guys. Last guys in, monitoring Amari and Hampton, and then last guy in, I actually put in the wrong defense for my first look. But I had Tyler Higbee as which I know I would put him at tight end, not flex. But going this route, and then with the if-then statement of, hey, Kamani Vidal is out, we'll know that news by the time the Chargers play. Well, guess what? Swap it out. Go with Kamani Vidal at $4,700, and then you can afford any defense you want. Obviously, at the point when we probably get that news, you won't get them, but Houston will be available. And Houston has been one of the scariest defenses all year. And I don't expect a ton of points this week. Even if they lose, they could still put up a 5-sack multi-turnover performance and really pay off, and them being $3,300. Kamani Vidal would be priced $1,000 too cheap in the event that Amarian was out. So I like that swappability as an instant if-then statement, clearing for that. I just want to be overweight to the Chargers. And like I said, Nico and AJ, I'm taking the stand that I'd rather play them for the low ownership than any of these multiple mid-K running backs. Putting up another look, though, I want to go on the Jacksonville side of things because Trevor's just been playing too damn good. If I'm going to be doing that, let's look at the ownership a little bit for Jacksonville players. So Jacksonville players, Travis Etienne, by far the highest owned Jaguar. And then after that, Parker Washington's actually the next highest owned, projecting for 11 fantasy points, 15% ownership. So decent point. I think Jacoby Myers has the best leverage and has probably the best floor. He's been pretty chalky the last couple of weeks, but if he's no longer chalky, I'm fine signing up for him. Britton Strange is okay, but on top of that, he's pretty popular as a tight end, so I probably would side with doing a double receiver or receiver running back in this scenario. I know I shit on Brian Thomas earlier, but if he's 6% owned, you're looking for a dart throw, sure, you could do that. Khalil Shakir on the other side of things. Put back in the defense. Let's go Pittsburgh this time. We should be able to afford something. Running back wise, I'm going to have a hard time not playing Christian McCaffrey in every lineup this week. And if I do that, then honestly, I could go on the other side and go Saquon. $5,400 last two in. That's going to open up a lot if I go at the flex. Not enough for Puka, though. Tight end wise, I think I'm going to just mix and match tight ends. Tight end, I feel less confident taking stands on than I do with the other players in positions. So I'm going to say Pat Freiermuth as a just one-off, or actually not even as a one-off. You can stack with Nico Collins if you wanted to save some money. Take off Saquon Barkley, put in James Cook if you wanted to, and then put in AJ Brown as a bring back to Christian McCaffrey. I really think AJ Brown is one of the better floors, and he shouldn't be less than 10% on large field tournaments. So going that route, if you wanted to go a cheaper running back, you could go down to, let's say, a DeAndre Swift in bad weather. He had an okay day the past game against Green Bay. Each of the last two games, he's had 13 carries. Calvin Nunga is really getting involved, but he's probably going to be the lowest owned of all of the starting running backs. Yeah, he's less than 10% owned right now. Home dog, I understand, but you can get a lot by doing that. And if you went all the way down, I wanted to try to fit Puka. And if you did that, you went all the way down to Gadsden or Tyler Higbee. Playing two Rams, kind of weird, but they're the highest supplied offense, so I understand it. Doing that route, I think, is a good way to go. And then we'll do one more and we'll get out of here. This time we'll do a value quarter. This time I want to do a Jalen Hurts build because I understand it's a tough matchup, but I don't think anybody's going to be comfortable about playing Philly doubles. And if it's going to happen, I just feel best doing that. I know Devontae Smith, if price didn't matter, would be probably my second favorite. But price does matter. And if he's $5,900, I think it's tough to get to, even if I'm doing that. Bring back is pretty obvious in this one. And I'm going to try to go cheap because of the way I'm building this line. Receiver-wise, I think stacking a couple guys in this 4K range could make some sense. Put in Keenan Allen maybe. You can put in Khalil Shakir again. You could put in Christian Watson if you wanted to. But $6,400 last two in. You can make an if-then statement for Amari and Hampton, or you can go value. You can put Kyron in 6,500 for either Josh Jacobs or Devontae, or you can go a little cheaper, go back to DeAndre Swift. That's enough for Nico Collins once again, which, like I said, I really, really don't mind being overweight to him. The problem is just I don't know if this is a floor game or a ceiling game, just because the matchup's there, but the points I don't think will be. So it's just, can a 6 for 108 and no touchdowns, can that still be optimal? I just don't know, is the question I'm wrestling with. But if I want more balance, you can go ETN to pair with some Khalil Shakir, and then last guy in, let's say Stephon Diggs. I understand it's going against the Chargers defense, but you're affording a lot by being able to play him. So I understand going that route. And if you didn't, you could do that as well. And honestly, I think if you wanted to correlate a little better, I think I'd rather play Omari and Hampton because it's going to be way less owned. And if he does not play, then obviously you can go back to Kamani, or you can just simply switch him out to Stephon Diggs, who both of them are probably going to project about the same. Roughly right now, both of them are right around 14 fantasy points. So I don't mind it at all. It's just Stephon Diggs is the much higher owned guy, which I say much higher owned, but he's only about 15%. But with that said, guys, that's all I got for you. We appreciate you tuning in. If you made it this far, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what your stands are. Once again, tell us what your Super Bowl picks are. I'm excited for it. Even though I'm not confident in my Super Bowl picks, I'm excited for a wide open playoffs. Anything can happen. I just hope that we don't have a ton of duds in the postseason. I hope it's down to the wire games. Just anything can happen. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm hoping for. And I hope we can profit along the way. So with that said, guys, be in that Discord. That's where we're going to post final lines. Saturday only lines, Sunday only lines. If we play showdowns, we're going to be posting it in Discord. It's for free. We're just trying to interact with you guys, play some fun lines. And it's been a great season so far. I want to finish strong, and I hope you guys will too. Until then, I will see you guys on the next one.